Wheatley, and welcome to episode 195 of the Weekly podcast. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you are doing so. YouTube, all that stuff, different background today. Maybe I'll explain later, or maybe I'll say nothing. I want to thank Dean Kavanagh, for coming on last week to discuss his film Holding the Head, but also creativity, being a director, screenwriter. We talked about, what else we talked about? We talked about loads of stuff actually towards the end, but it's a really good listen. It's in all the usual spots. You can support us and buy me a coffee. Link is in the description. That's all the admin out of the way. Our guest this week is a professional creative, and her name is Leah Egan. How are you doing, Leah?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
Happy to be here.
It's very nice to have you. I appreciate you coming on and doing this on your Saturday, on your day off.
Yeah, well, half a day off.
Half
maybe.
a day off. Well, that's
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah,
And this makes up for it, you know.
absolutely.
Well, we'll see in an hour. We'll see in an hour's time. But before we get into all the kind of the stuff about what you do and there's a lot to talk about. Can you give us a short history of your upbringing, please?
Sure can. I was born in a place called Athlone, and I am the eldest of five, and I grew up and was raised like a normal human. And I moved away from Athlone and went to college in Dublin, and then have had a bit of a roundabout trip around the world to come back here. So I'm in Athlone at the moment.
There was we had this conversation about the fact that neither of us have particularly strong Athlone accents.
No,
and
surprisingly.
I think it's that thing though, isn't it? Like you just said there, obviously you were living there till you went to college, and then college and afterwards you were all over the place, really. So it's kind of, do you remember, I had this conversation with my mom this morning, actually. Do you remember when you were younger, did you have an Athlone accent, or had you a more refined way of speaking?
Refined. My mother, if she ever listens to this, my mother is a speech and drama teacher. Okay. So she would probably like to take credit if any of us have a neutral, refined accent. I do remember though when I went to college first, which was, what year was that? I don't know. Anyway, after I finished secondary school, I went to college in Dublin, and I do remember thinking that I had to neutralize my accent because I realized there were some people in Dublin who found me difficult to understand. So that possibly means that I did have an accent. And then after being in university in Dublin, I had lived in Dublin for a while, and then I went into acting, and I realized that it would be of benefit to have a neutral accent, you know, because then at least you can put on the bells and whistles. Whereas if you go in with an accent, it's more difficult to strip it away.
Yeah,
than it is to build on top.
Do you think if someone has a particularly strong accent that they can kind of get put into a certain role every time?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like if I came up here and I went, "Hi, Derek, how's it going?"
Yeah.
Like you already think there's a different image in your mind of who I am. It's not good or bad, it's just different. I think there's a lot to be said in an accent. I love accents. I absolutely love them. I would listen to the more different, the better. But I do know that I lived in Vancouver for nearly 5 years. So when I came back, I still say things like movie, and I get mixed up on this one now. Adult versus adult.
Yeah.
And I have to come back to basics, because otherwise I'd be excommunicated by all of my Irish mates.
Yeah, like it does, like those kind of things stand out. And I like, the movie is an interesting one because I tend to use that when I'm speaking about the more popcorn, you know, orientated films like the Marvel stuff, and then I say like a film is something that's a bit more serious. But Leah, then, but you know that it's kind of, you know, adult and adult is kind of one of the things that I think I just make a mistake by saying adult sometimes rather than adult. You know, it's a weird. Anyway, it's not that important. But listen, so we always ask this question to Leah, just to kind of get it's interesting to get a kind of feel for, you know, it depends on demographic and age group, all those kind of things. When did you first become aware of mental health?
I think officially was when I started my, I don't know, I have a thing against the word journey, but when I first got sober, it's like a crash course in mental health, really, for anyone that has ever embarked upon that journey. But I do know, and I've said this before, I think as a child, you are more perceptive than you think you are. So I think even if you didn't have the language, because as you say, it's a different time now, we have lots of language around mental health and awareness and all those kind of things. But I think as a child, you're very perceptive. So even if you don't have the language for the thing, you can identify suffering and you can sense it out nearly. And I think I think as Irish people, even in the past, like when I was a young person, I know you'd hear your parents saying, "Oh, they suffer with their nerves," or they'd be quite close to their demons. And I always
Hmm.
thought, you understood those things. And I think now you say those things, you see those things as mental health. But like now that we have the language to talk about it, and I think it's really important. That's why I'm here today, because I think it's really important that people have very candid conversations about mental health now that we can talk about it and put it in the open. But yeah, officially when I got sober, but I think a long time before then,
Yeah.
unofficially. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I was chatting to a guest, and we were talking about that, just the idea of knowing that you felt a little bit different in school, but you didn't quite know why it was. And when you talk about sobriety, for instance, when I was drinking an awful lot, and I decided, right, I need to knock this in the head. I felt that everything was exposed, like all the nerves were exposed without the alcohol and without the weed and whatever else the people are doing out there, and they move away from it.
Mm.
It's this raw nerve, and all of a sudden you have to tackle something. And again, at the time, I didn't have any knowledge or anything to help with the mental health. So it was kind of like, oh, I'm going to take the alcohol away and whatever else you're doing, and now all of a sudden you're just left sitting there in the, you said fighting the demons, is just kind of very like, poetic way, and an interesting way of looking at it. But that's what it felt like. It was this
Mm.
horrible feeling, but having no education on how to kind of solve it or help.
Well, also, I feel like, I don't know, the phrase mental health, like, even if when you're in suffering, the phrase mental health doesn't mean much to you, because
Hmm.
health, you're like, well, you nearly need it to be mental unhealth.
Yeah.
Because if you're suffering and you're in pain, the concept of mental health feels so far away. Because I know in kind of darker moments, well, I found anyway from my own experience, it can be quite difficult to conceive of a better, of a healthier version of yourself, whatever that is. So it could be the phrasing about it as well. But yeah, I've always been quite close to the kind of demon terminology, and I say that jokingly, but at the same time, I know how painful it is. So
Hmm.
it's never to make, if ever I'm making jokes, it's never to make light of the situation, because I've been there. But I do think as Irish people we like a bit of black humor as well. So
we
yeah.
this has been, we've talked about this. Well, I've talked about this to people, and there has to be a level of humor in it as well.
Yeah.
There has to be. And you said something to me the other day, and it was kind of something that kind of stuck with me, and the idea of removing the two from each other, like the word mental and the word health from each other.
Mm.
And I thought it was a very interesting way of looking at it, because you know, we used to use the term like mental, like with people, like, it's mental.
Yeah.
And will say like, oh, that's mental, still, but it wouldn't have, obviously, I'm not saying it has to do with mental health when I say it, but it's like, that's mental. But when we're talking about health, I honestly think of, when I think of health, I think of good health. Like when I think of the
Okay.
word health, so I don't
Yeah.
think immediately of bad health. So I'm thinking of like, oh, I need to go to the gym, or I need to like go for a run for my health. But when we look at like mental health and put the two words back together, it's an interesting way, because it immediately means a bad thing, and there is the good mental health as well as bad mental health. And it's just,
Right.
I know it's just terminology and it's words, but they stick in there, like those words, and the way we take them in.
It's like the word diet. So diet can mean two things. It can mean what you eat, just what you ingest, or it can mean, something associated with restriction.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I quite like that way of looking at it, as it can be just very broad,
Yeah,
or they can be separate things altogether. It's
but yeah,
yeah, it's about the language that you use, I think,
yeah.
and apply what makes sense and disregard the rest, because some things might be useful for some people, and then in other terms that could be have stigma attached to it for somebody else. So it's all about just trying it on yourself and being like, okay, well, that feels relevant to me and where I'm at.
And that's the same as the humor, like, because some people will be maybe not in the same place, and they'll find that kind of humor a little bit like certain things that we might say a little bit crass or whatever. But the whole thing is like, if we've seen it and we've been through this stuff, it's not like we would ever take the piss out of someone else's journey. Like, we know how bad it can be,
Oh,
but we use it for ourselves, and we probably use it in our darkest times as well, to try and deflect from it as well. So
yeah.
there is a lot in the way we speak about it, but there should be some sort of like the Irish do love dark humor, and there should be some sort of dark humor about it. When you were growing up, Leah, were you creative?
Yeah, so me and all of my brothers and sisters, we were quite privileged in the sense that mom, she would run us around to everything under the sun, really. So we were in lots of kind of, I think they're now called extracurricular activities. Posh. But no, like we all did lots of things. Some of the things that we loved, some things we didn't love so much. We tried everything, which was great. And I think that's the best way, is to try everything as a kid, because then you find not just what you're good at, but what you truly enjoy. So from a creative perspective, like my mother, we would have grown up seeing her on stage locally. She's an actor and she loves drama and she's intensely creative as a woman. So we just kind of took it for granted that that's how people lived their lives, like between Halloween and costume and stage school and all of these things. I took it for granted until I kind of moved away from home, or until my friends started having children. Or like, yeah, the older you get, I realized, oh, I just accepted that as normal, that we were all running around being intensely creative. But then I wonder, because this was something I was talking about with my friend recently. I think when you're a child, there's not a huge pressure, but there's such importance on creative things. I hear my friends who are parents and they're talking about their children who have done this amazing drawing and they'll be so proud of it and all of these things. But then you get to a certain age where you're supposed to nearly knuckle down and forget about when you get to fifth year, you have to put on your serious head and face the leaving cert and forget about
Yeah.
that art and the acting and the dancing and like that. It's very important until it's completely pushed aside, and all of a sudden you have the kind of grown up vocations that slip in. But as a kid, I was, yeah, living my best creative life, thankfully. Yeah,
Which is
I love
amazing.
it.
And like, I think I've always tried to be creative with music and things like that. But I think when I was young, say towards the end of primary into the start of secondary school, I was too self-conscious to be outwardly creative. So yeah, I think you know what I mean though, because there's especially at that age, there
I
has
listened. I listened to the audiobook, but it's a book. Who is it? I can't remember. But so I'm going to just take, somebody else said this, and it's a
sorry.
science. It's a fact. So it's not my fact,
Okay.
but it is a fact. But that creativity drops off a cliff after the age of 9 or 10, because I believe it's around 8 or 9 is the sweet spot where you become aware of yourself in relation to others. Whereas up until that point, psychologically, you are just in your situation, you're present as a child. It's fantastic to watch. Like, I love just being around kids because they're so into their imagination,
Mhm.
and you just want to be in there with them. You're like, wow, you are so in this. This is real, and yes, this is a puppet, and yes, this is a dog. But then once you become conscious of yourself in relation to others, that's when the self-conscious aspect creeps in. So it would make sense that
Mhm.
around the end of primary school is when everyone kind of takes on their self-conscious coats, and all of a sudden all of the imagination kind of seeps away, because we start to do this thing, which I think is one of the most toxic things that we do, is to play it cool.
Yeah.
And unfortunately that normally looks like repressing the zany dance or the voices. Like, I was emphatically obsessed with Jim Carrey as an 11-year-old, and as a girl as well. It must have struck people as very strange. Like, and that was the time of The Mask and
Yeah.
Ace Ventura, and I was just going around like I was Jim Carrey. But then, of course, I became a teenager and I realized, oh my goodness, I have to rein this in.
Yeah.
So I totally identify. Yeah, I totally relate to the fact that you can be intensely creative and then all of a sudden you feel like, oh wow, to fit in, I need to kind of dumb
Yeah.
that down a bit, maybe.
But did your kind of foundation in what you were doing and what your mother was exposing you to, did it help with that, do you think? Or did you still have that experience that I was kind of mentioning?
Oh God, no. I still
Mm.
have societal anxiety,
Yeah.
so I think it kind of, it was at its worst when I was a teenager, and that would have been around the same time that I like, I kept everything. I was still very creative and imaginative in my head, and I'd be off and in my own little land. But externally, I I completely stopped the Jim Carrey factor. You know, I completely reined it in unless I was on stage and then I turned it on. But outside of that, in my everyday life, I would have done the robot dance as well. Whereas in my head, I had all these mad voice like, and then I look around at people, and I love one of my favorite things to do is to walk through a kind of corporate district and look at all these people in suits and then be like, I wonder which of you is, you know,
Yeah.
doing all your strange voices in your head and all your impersonations and stuff. So yeah, no, on the outside I would have kind of dumbed it down definitely, but inside I was still creative.
But that thing of, like you said, so because this is what people who haven't acted before may not understand, or played music on stage before may not understand, is like that you could switch things on and off. Like, because the idea of being self-conscious is like, to me, you know, I've improved at it, but that idea of getting up on stage again is terrifying to me, to get up and play a guitar and sing in front of people. I don't see me being able to switch it off, but you can obviously do it, and you've done it since like you said, since you were young.
It depends. It depends. I think there's a few threads that I think if you force yourself and you really are like grappling with crippling anxiety, uh, and that includes being self-conscious, if you were to force yourself through it, I'm not sure there's much merit to it, because afterwards your nervous system would be in complete shock nearly, and you'd probably have to go and lie down for a long while. And I don't know, there is a, I think baby steps, I think incrementally would be the way to get there. I
Yeah.
think instead of throwing yourself off that cliff of standing on a stage, in my experience, incremental is the way forward. And then the tiny baby steps, every single step that you go, you slowly release the hold on the vision of the other, because that's what it is, and it's difficult to articulate, but the self-conscious aspect of you standing on stage is actually you othering yourself. You're looking at yourself as you perceive other people to be looking at you. So there's a whole dance going on there, you know, and it's a very difficult thing to drop. You can't consciously just go, okay, great, I'm going to fake it till I make it.
Yeah.
But you can take baby steps to get there, and every single time will be difficult. You know, it's not like you ever master it. Like I would still feel the nerves, and my hands will shake. But then you also have to remember that, you know, fear and exhilaration are they manifest physically in the same way.
Yeah.
You know, if you're pumped for something, if you're pumped to get on stage, your heart rate is going to be like, so it's all about, especially for actors, maybe the same for musicians. I don't know how, I don't know how many of them would do similar. I suppose they do their vocal warm-ups, those kind of things. But the more routine you can have before you go on stage to ground down and get into your body, the more you can get out of your head and move away from being self-conscious, because it's a uncomfortable place to be.
It is. When
Yeah.
you're like, say, if you're working, you know, on the stage, say it's like a 2 hour performance, much how much different is that work compared to if you're working on a TV show or a film where you have to kind of dip in and out of things, and you're not staying in the same character, I assume, are you? Unless you're going full method, which is fair enough if you are. But I'd imagine it's difficult to switch in and out as you're coming in and out of scenes or takes.
Yeah, they're very different things.
Yeah.
They're different beasts entirely, being on stage and being on the set. And it's why I gravitate towards sets, and why luckily that's where the work has been for me in my career, has been on set, which is good, because for me it's more intimate, it's quieter, you know, I'm sensory sensitive. So, you know, it's a lot easier on my nervous system. Whereas being on stage, you're giving off a lot. You're
Yeah.
giving off. And when you're on the stage for 2 hours, you are normally, depending on how big your cast is, so you're often very reliant on the other people on the stage with you. If you're there by yourself, you're just living it moment to moment to moment to moment, and that's how you get to the end. Whereas with something like being on set, and you're doing take after take after take after take, I've found you do need to take those breathers. You do need to go away, come back, go away, come back. So they're very different things. But at the same time, they both have that self-conscious aspect. Like, some people might think, oh, well, acting for camera, surely that's almost easier. Like, I think people underestimate how many people are looking at you when you are on set. Like the light, like there
Yeah.
are so many people doing their different jobs and they are all looking at you, but not because they're judging you. They're looking at you to make sure that their job is going
Hmm.
right. God, her hair is looking askew now, and that's the makeup and hair, and then someone else is looking at your clothes, but they're all looking at you,
Yeah.
and you have to pretend like there's nobody. Whereas at least on stage you're feeding it out, and people are looking at you, but nobody's pretending they're not looking at you.
Yeah.
Whereas on set it's different.
There's another part of the self-conscious thing, and I spoke to you about this before, of the idea of being noticed, or somebody coming up to you and saying, "Oh, hey, what's the story? I'm such and such." And there's for me, I'm not gonna. I appreciate everybody who comes up and says, "I know your podcast." I listen. Obviously, I do, but to me, I freeze almost, like, because again, self-conscious element, but also the anxiety around interaction sometimes. And some days, like, you're grand, on other days you're like, you feel horrendous, and then they're usually the days that this happens. How do you feel about, like, being approached in that? Is it something that you still kind of enjoy, or is it a bit of a pain?
It, mm, I love a good chat.
Yeah.
And in the same breath, it can be unsettling if you have anxiety and someone turns to you and says hello, and you find yourself, you're already in a conversation
Yeah.
and you've no reference point for that person. So your brain is in overdrive, being like, okay, this person is this, like it's kind of, your brain is going, like, so for the first few moments there's a bit of a, I am deeply unsettled by this, but then it's usually like, as you probably know yourself, it'd be very rare that someone would, and I hope it stays rare, that someone would approach you in a street
Yeah.
or on a bus to hurl abuse at you. So
Yeah.
usually, and it usually comes from a place of, hello, I've seen you on this, or hello, I listened to the podcast. And it's often, and this might be useful for you, I don't know, but it's often about them and their
Yeah.
experience. So it's the moment that you can focus in on that and be like, oh, this person is talking to me about their life.
Hmm.
They don't really want to talk about mine, unless they do. And in that situation, I don't know, Godspeed, have a
Yeah.
lovely time. But it's about them. They want to share something. And then if you can find a way to just simply allow that share, then there's a great conversation. And it's one of my favorite things,
Yeah.
is to connect with someone that way, because you've reached across a podcast, or I've reached through a TV screen,
Hmm.
or like you've found them and they found you, and then so it just kind of makes sense that you would kind of end that connection with a lovely chat about, oh wow, yeah, because I really enjoyed that, or
Yeah. Like, it is very nice. That's the whole thing. And that's, like, I wanted to bring up and not kind of immediately go, I gotta hate. What happens is, when I'm in that conversation, I'm thinking to myself, you're unprepared for this. So you're speaking nonsense. And it's not like, I know it's not, it's in my head and all that. And
yeah,
I get it. So it's not the end of the world. I, I like having, again, look, once I'm in the conversation, I do like having chat, like, and getting involved. So it's good. And, it's one of those things. Um, like, why do you think that you kind of gravitated towards wanting help, like, to help other people be creative?
can you repeat that?
Sorry. Why do you think you gravitated towards wanting to kind of help other people be creative?
Because I had nobody to help me,
Hmm.
really, would be my answer. I distinctly recall being, because I knew when I was, I'd say between 14 and 15, I knew I would love nothing more than if I could find a way to perform and be paid to
Hmm.
perform. Like that was the thing. And up until that point, I'd really struggled with, what do I want to do? And I joke about, that's why I became an actor, because I wanted to be an architect, and I wanted to be an interior designer, and I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to be all these things. I wanted to be a basketballer, and then I was sorely disappointed when I kind of understood that being a professional footballer as a woman at the time was not the same as being a professional footballer as a man. So I had to
Hmm.
let that go, in my mind, all these things, as if I was going to. But anyway, so by the time I got to 14 or 15, I was like, wow, I would love this. And it was like a secret realization. And this is why I now do what I do, because it takes a lot of bravery, but it also takes a while before people might even get the stage of verbalizing a desire to do something that is different.
Yeah.
A desire to do something that might be met with resistance, or not even resistance, but like I made a quip about it earlier where people often say, are you still doing the acting?
Yeah.
And like, you never hear people go, are you doing the banking? Are
Yeah.
you doing the engineering? So it's not even, it's an ignorance in the sense that they just don't have a box to put it in.
Yeah.
They don't have a reference point. They know like, oh, Brad Pitt, Jennifer Aniston, but then outside of that, they don't know working actors. They don't know, what it's like kind of on the ground as
Yeah.
an actor. They see end result film and they just assume, it's and it's not their fault. It's just the way that the culture works, is that you only see the end product. You don't know much about what goes on behind the scenes unless, you're following people and all of those kind of things. So then I remember thinking, God, I'd love to do this, but then having no reference point, like having no professional creative person. And I call myself a professional creative because I do many things, but like even to have someone close by who was a writer, like a working creative that did this thing that seemed so elusive, and how do you get paid for that? And how do you learn to do that? And how do you get really good at that? And what is that? Like acting? Do you just walk in and say the lines? And like
Yeah.
I had so many questions that I would have loved to have spoken to someone about, and just not even for them to train me necessarily, but just to kind of say, well, if you did want to do this seriously, where would you go? Like, what would you do? Like, I remember I think Google was beginning to be a thing, because I'm showing my age now, but Google was beginning to be a thing. And I remember like Googling, where to study acting, like I was looking for all these kind of, who do I know that's Irish that does this? And did they learn, or did they just get lucky, or like, and kind of trying to find the trail of where do I go and how do I learn, and do I have to audition to go somewhere? Or so now I like to think that I'm providing a space that if younger people, because I do think between like say 14 and 18, there's so much pressure on you to know what you want to do for the rest of your life, which is like, it's it's just so, I can't even get my head around it, that you would need to know at the age of 18, which
Yeah.
feels so incredibly young right now, to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. So just to have a space that people can come and say, oh, I'd like to try this, at least
Yeah.
try it on, and maybe that guides them somewhere else. But and also just, I'm naturally very enthusiastic. I use my hands a lot. I and it's my favorite thing. It is my favorite thing in the world to see somebody talk or do the thing that stirs them. So it doesn't, and I will make a point, and it drives my sister crack. Like, I will make a point of 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 trying to find the thing with a person. So say I see a person often in my life, and we don't know each other very well, but I will just wait for the day where they like let something slip about something that they care about, and I am on it like a car bonnet. I'm
Yeah.
like, like, and all of a sudden, it's the best thing. You just see someone light up from the inside out, and they're like telling you facts or whatever it is, or whether it's stand-up comedy, or it can be anything. It can be knitting. It can be, and I probably won't be as invested in the thing as they
Yeah.
are,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm invested in their investment. And that's what I love. And that's why I love training actors. That's why I love coaching people, because when you can see somebody really step into their element and really just be like, because not everything that I love, you're going to love, and vice versa. But that's what makes the world go round. So if you're doing what you love, it's what you naturally love. And I just believe that that's going to make the world a better place, because it's your natural inclination. It's not mine.
Yeah.
I'm not running a podcast, but I do feel like because your natural inclination is to do it, it's needed. That's
Yeah.
just creativity working like on a whole evolutionary scale. If we all listen to what our natural inclinations are, which
Yeah.
is the
Like it's Spinster Productions is what your brand is. Is that the correct
yeah,
word? Okay, is that all
yeah,
right? All right,
Spencer
that's all right.
Production. Yeah.
Yeah, just because you just don't know. But what I when I went into it to have a look, Leah, I obviously knew that you're an actor. I know that you're an actor, and I just thought going in kind of ignorantly thinking that this is just going to be about acting, coaching, But
Mm-hmm.
then I saw about bringing out creativity in people, and I think creativity is kind of fascinating in a lot of different ways, because I think if people don't or they're not kind of led down the path, or kids, I should say, rather than people. But kids aren't led down the path to be creative or shown to be. This is how you paint, or this is how start playing the guitar, whatever it is. They're never going to get there. Do you think like that everybody can be creative? Is there creativity inside everyone?
Yes. Oh, well,
Okay.
I feel, yeah. And I know there's obviously people think of the traditional arts and they're creative and, performance and painting and all of the things that are revered as the traditional
Mm.
arts. That makes sense to me that people see those things as creative, but also like on a very base level, you create energy from the food that you eat. You create dreams in your mind when you're asleep. You do things, lots of things that are creative that you mightn't consider creative. But, you can be creative. Say I have to clean the floor. I can be creative about the way that I get it done so it's done quickly.
Hmm.
You can be creative making an Excel spreadsheet. Not my personal brand, but like
Yeah.
you can be creative in every single walk of life. It's not confined to the creative arts. They're different things, I think. I think creativity in and of itself is in everybody.
Yeah.
We're all creative in a different way. And if you haven't been shown the arts as a child, maybe you might not see yourself as quite gifted as a painter or as a writer. But I think, and if you've ever been around children for any extended period of time, they're all creative.
Hmm.
They are all making up these games and everybody's on board as well, like there's no child that's like, this isn't true until
Yeah.
they're 8 or 9, and then all of a sudden the other creeps in. But up until a certain point, every single child in a classroom, they mightn't all be playing together, but they're all making believe and drawing pictures, and nobody gives a hoot about whether they're good or they're bad,
Yeah.
or like, and somebody's playing with Lego and somebody else is doing something else, and then you see like the people with the Lego are probably going to grow up to be engineers. Like we all have it, our own little brand of creativity. But often, because we live in like social media world and all of these things where you see these huge, these great paintings, you might kind of stunt your own creative growth by thinking that you need to go from zero to that,
Yeah.
which isn't true, because like the creativity is the process versus the end anything. So creativity is about how you create versus what you create. So it's more about play than anything else.
Yeah.
What if you were let play, what would you do? Where would you go?
Yeah.
What would you
Yeah.
pick up? What would you put down? So I love the word play. I think play is brilliant. Kind of captures
Yeah.
everything.
It does capture everything. It's if you take that kind of play as a verb, bringing it towards music, you might think, okay, you listen to Vivaldi or something, and you think, I'm never. How can I write something like that? But then you listen to the Sex Pistols, for instance, 3 chord kind of thing, and it sounds kind of sloppy and it's fuzzy and everything like that. But then there's a reason it captured so many people's attention, because you thought to
Yeah.
yourself, well, maybe I can play God Save the Queen or whatever. So that kind of thing about play is great, because you could pick up guitar and I could pick up guitar and you could be streets ahead of me immediately, but it doesn't really matter that much, because it's what you're doing with what your ability like. And I do like the idea of people being able to go to you and kind of expressing themselves in that way, because they know they're not going to be judged. If they talk to their parents might go, oh, the whole acting thing or the music thing or the writing thing. But if they go to you, at least they have someone who's open-minded and on the same kind of level
Mm.
with the idea of creativity. And that, like, it's like you mentioned, 14 to 18, they're great years for like learning music or acting and or anything you want to do.
Hmm. Yeah, like I wonder, I don't know, like if I went to back in my day, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, did I just say that out
Back in our day.
loud? Back in our day, thank you for the solidarity.
Sorry.
I feel like if I went, and I did go to my career guidance counselor, but I was never offered the options of, have you considered, and that would have been as someone who was always will be intensely creative,
Yeah.
has always been in stage schools, has always been in art. Like I did art, it was my favorite subject, but yet it was never offered as, have you considered this? Have you
Mhm.
considered this? Right. So I would like to think that these days, I don't know that it's true, but I wonder what does be going on in the guidance counselor's room.
Yeah.
Like what do they offer? Are they still stuck on what they used to be back in the day, which was, law, psychology, medicine, all the kind of big wigs. And that was the thing from my perspective. perspective as well. Like, no disrespect to my guidance counselor at the time, but I am lucky to say that I'm incredibly book smart,
Mm-hmm.
and it's probably why I was offered the kind of more traditionally academic routes as the ways to go, because it would have been the most sensible
Yeah.
option, or from a security, stability perspective. But then sensibility kind of also has to take into account what would you be happiest at? What are you best at? What are you most comfortable doing? Like, sensibility isn't just financial. And
Yeah.
that's where I think having someone that broadens the options a bit more is just really useful.
The people I've spoken to, like yourselves, who are creative and within, different creative industries, we'll call them, for that's probably not the best word, but anyway, it always seemed to have been they bounced off their friends rather than what was going on in school. Like it came from MTV or from their brother's video VHS. Now I'm showing my age, but VHS collection or DVD collection. It was never like you say, that was never encouraged in school, the idea of the arts. And you just made me laugh earlier on when you said about you still doing the acting, and no matter what you do, like in acting, whether you're on TV or film on stage, it'll still be the acting. It's it's very interesting to me how that hasn't changed, because it hasn't. It's
Yeah.
never. It probably never will. It might die out maybe with generations, but maybe not. Maybe it'll still be the same thing as the arts are something you do in your spare time.
Yeah, it's a hobby.
Yeah.
It's, and that's why, and there is this trope of the struggling artist, which actually damages a lot of intensely creative people,
Mm-hmm.
where you somehow might conceive what you're doing because it's kind of fed to you as surely that's a hobby. If you are creative and you're doing these things, you might somehow convince yourself that it's self-indulgent to pursue something. And especially with something like acting, which can be confused quite often from the outside looking in as exhibitionism. Jazz hands, look at me, look at
Yeah.
me. If you've met any actors who are worth their salt, a lot of them are hermits. A lot of them really shirk underneath the bright light of people staring at them that isn't to do with work. So I feel like there's this kind of, I don't know, it's because it's elusive as well, creativity, acting. Nobody knows how you do it. So they kind of say, oh, the acting,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And I think I don't know, will we ever get to a point where people say, are you still acting? But also, why do people ask that?
I don't know. I like,
like, I don't
yeah.
understand why. I don't go up to people in the middle of the street and be like, are you still whatever
Yeah.
working in a school?
It's like it's seen as a phase or something that you're going through,
Yeah.
like like you're a teenager or something that, this is a kind of, one of those
But
ideas you had.
yeah, and then so because there's so much confusion and because it's fed to us as a hobby, I feel like artists themselves and creative people kind of feel like it's self-indulgent to be doing it, and it's vain, and it's a waste of time, when really, like, I think back to, it wasn't so long ago, pandemic hit, everybody tools down, including the industry of
Yeah.
film and TV, everything was down. But what people were doing in that time, apart from making banana bread, which is also creative,
Yeah.
let's be real, but like, people fell into podcasts, and they fell into box sets, and they fell into books, and they fell into all of these things that basically just kept everyone
Yeah.
going. Like, and we all joked about, oh, well, we're all sick of Netflix now at this stage because we've watched everything on there. But it's because that's what we reached for. That's what
Yeah.
fed us. That's what kept us going. And then for that to be dismissed as a hobby
Yeah.
when it's all we had, like, it's all we had. We had no more corporate jobs. We'd no more, everything was closed. And so we were left with the kind of creative things. And that's what kept us going. And then
Yeah.
I look at people and I'm like, "Oh, you think this is a hobby?" Like, I really do. It is the hill that I will die on. I'm like,
Yeah.
art, creativity, all of it is so important. It is so important on so many levels because it feeds you
Yeah.
when you're creating. I'm sure you pick up a guitar, it doesn't matter what it sounds like. You feel better after. You feel like,
Yeah.
oh, I feel like I just, yeah, something was purged or cathartic or whatever. But equally, if you're lucky, somebody's on the receiving end, possibly. and it hits a chord, and it mightn't be you doing the thing, it might be a song that reminds them of someone else. Like there's so many different threads about how we create, and how it reaches other people. And that's why I think just to dismiss it as something, quite frivolous. And I'm not saying you do, I just mean in general,
Yeah.
there's a consensus where if you can't understand it, surely it's not that important. But then I look at these people and I wonder, and these would be the very people that are in the front in the concerts,
Yeah,
going,
yeah, yeah.
crying,
Yeah.
tears down their faces. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, can't if they can't see
Yeah.
it doesn't line up for them. But when I had the breakdown, I was 27 when it happened, and I remember a girl who worked in a cafe. I wouldn't talk to anybody, but I used to go there with my dad, and she gave me a box set of Alfred Hitchcock films. Okay, so I'd seen one or two, like The Birds or whatever, but none of the kind of deep cuts. And I remember going back and watching that, and that's when I really started to get into films because they were healing for me. I could
Mhm.
see characters on the screen that I can relate to, not fully, maybe having breakdowns or anything, but having struggles and kind of rising out of them and stuff like that. And I started to see these performances, and they'll never kind of leave my head because of it. When I was really, really low, I could see these performances on screen where I was just kind of, well, I was moved or blown away. And we felt like you would have seen that, as someone who's into acting, you'll have seen films and actors and actresses where you're just kind of going, like, it seems impossible. That is, I think, is when it came to me. I always thought of music as this kind of creative peak, and there was nothing else. But when I got into it the way I did after getting that box set, I started to see acting as this kind of thing that like had to be protected at all costs in a way. Like, it became so important
Yeah.
to me. Um, like you must have seen that growing up, those kind of movies, and you don't have to name them or try to remember all the ones that moved you, but you must have seen films where you were just kind of going, that's the peak of art or of creativity.
I film for me is unparalleled
Hmm.
as an artistic medium. I think there's also a misconception that actors are playing pretend, and like there is, and I will make a quip about it as well. I've been guilty of it too, where I'm like, oh, I play pretend for a living. But really, if you're acting and you're performing properly, you are being like true acting is being 100% truthful. You are living that emotion, and it's that person living that emotion that enables you to see that emotion and to vicariously live it through you. And that's why film works, because you're responding to something that you see that is authentic, and therefore it hits something here, and then you have an authentic experience without even leaving your living room. You are like living this thing, and it might necessarily even be the nugget that's on the screen. It might just be, oh my God, that person, the way they speak really reminds me of someone. And you cathartically are having an emotional experience. I think it's why people gravitate to movies and
Yeah.
films so much, because they might be starved of that vulnerability and that raw emotion in their real life. And I just remember as a young person watching films and experiencing that, and experiencing that to the level of like, I I think I think watching that just changed my life, because and I can say the same for theater, but film more so for me, that it can change you on a visceral level. If you see something that really moves you, you take it with you. It's
Yeah.
the same for a great book as well. You take a piece of it with you, and it stays with you. And the great ones, as you probably know if you're into film, is the ones that stay with you for days, and
Yeah.
you're still thinking back on them, and you're like, yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
and they're my favorite, where you go away and they're still sitting there. And it can be the controversial ones, it can be the ones that you didn't think you'd like, but then you're like, oh wow, that was really and it affects and it informs how you view your world as well, which is when it all gets, yeah, there's so
Yeah.
many layers.
Yeah, that is amazing about film. It can be like that for you with regards to how you look at the world after, or how you like that whole thing about you're reflected, back on the screen. You see yourself in
I
certain people.
And I also feel, it's a conspiracy theory of mine, but I feel like so many people are walking around the world wearing suits and standing like robots, and like, we're all still the kids trying to fit in.
Yeah.
We're all the 9 and 10-year olds trying to play it cool, and don't let on that you have silliness inside of you.
Yeah.
Silliness is my favorite thing. I love when it accidentally leaks out to someone. You see a bit
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
silliness and you're like, oh wow. But we're all walking around. So like part of that reining it in, part of playing it cool is that you kind of, I don't know, are we all being very honest with each other? We're talking about the weather, we're talking about, I don't know, flooding that's happening here, or we're talking about things that are not really of great consequence when you think of an emotional human level. Like I can be a devil sometimes in that I go hard or go home. I find small talk very difficult,
Mhm.
which probably doesn't come as a surprise now that we've had a good old chat. But like
Yeah,
I find small talk and frivolous chit chat about nothingness not frustrating really, but I just want to get in there and be
yeah.
like, what's in there, what's going on, what's down there. And that can be quite jarring if you are just sitting at a desk or a checkout and this woman just
Well,
arrived.
we like I don't mind letting people know. Like we met for the first time the other day. We had a bit of a emails and stuff sending back and forth. Obviously, I wanted you to come on, but I came away from it going, Jesus, we went fairly deep in that conversation.
That's what happens. That's what
Yeah,
happens. And like, and my sister, she won't mind me saying, it drives her demented sometimes because she's like, can we not just like people, if you go forward, and it's
yeah.
not that I go around interrogating everybody. That's not how I live my life. I would never do that to someone. If I would never invite something forward that wasn't being
Mhm.
offered. I think that would be a complete invasion or intrusion on somebody's privacy. But I do, because, and it started when I got sober first. I realized I needed to start telling the truth. Like I
Yeah,
needed to start, because there were so many lies. And I don't even mean lies in the sense of like stealing things and the way that we understand lies. I mean lies as in I just wasn't being honest in everything I was doing. I was doing things I didn't enjoy. And I was,
yeah,
kind of selling myself short that way. So I started telling the truth. And that was kind of what has kept me sober, is that I tell the truth. And often it can be quite jarring for someone who is not used to people who tell the truth. They're
yeah,
kind of, you can be taken aback by it because you're like, I asked her how she was and she said shit. Like, you
yeah,
kind of, some people might be like, what the hell was that? She
yeah,
answered honestly. And I just think it's really important to answer honestly. So if I answer honestly, often what happens is somebody will offer up their honesty.
yeah,
So me and my sister would have gone to the supermarket, and it might so happen that I encounter a conversation where someone is, being very honest, and I open space for that. I think if ever somebody offers up their honesty to you, it can lead to great places. Like our
yeah,
chat was great, but
yeah.
I'm not surprised that you were kind of like, wow, she is she is a
Well,
talker.
it's cathartic because what,
Yeah, it's
like, I
great.
hope I hope you don't mind me saying, you mentioned about sobriety there, but the idea like that, I think in the opening like 5 or 6 lines that we had spoken, we started to talk about like we were drinking tea. So we were saying, "Oh, I only drink tea. I don't and water." And I said, do you drink alcohol?" Or something came up about alcohol. I didn't obviously come out and just say, "Do you drink alcohol?" But you said, "No, I'm an alcoholic." But all of a sudden, like if someone says that to you that you haven't met before, it's like, oh, this is actually going to be. I can relax a bit. We never met,
Yeah,
so I can relax. And all my stuff is out there, as you know, but it's still not. I don't go up to every person I meet and tell them like this is what the crack is. Like, I had a breakdown when I was 27 and I don't drink anymore because blah blah. But it does open up those kind of that communication. You let your guard down, and sometimes you'll get something off your chest that would have stayed there. If you
yeah,
hadn't met you. So it's funny. Like you are someone who acts, but yet in real life you couldn't be more open, and you're not playing a role, you're just being yourself. It was a rewarding experience chatting to you, because then my mom said to me this morning, you kind of nervous about the podcast? Because sometimes I am. And I was like, no, sure, I was chatting to her the other day, and there was a calming element to it. And that's why I think, bringing it back to if someone is listening to this and they are someone who has an interest in being creative, but even the idea of, maybe they thought like acting was definitely out of their reach, that they never thought that they think it's impossible, and I can't be an actor. Look at the way I talk, or I've a low accent. No, but all these kind of different things. I think you'd be a great person to go to, because you can bring that out in people. That idea that the personal life can be spoken and discussed, and then the freedom is there then to be more creative and to talk about becoming an actor. People think that some people, that you can't train to be an actor. You're either an actor or you're not, and it's obviously completely untrue. Marlon Brando trained, Ellen Bernstein trained, all these people trained, and I just think it's great that somebody like yourself is doing this, like, so that young people can go and, try it out.
I do have a theory that if you want to do something, or you suspect that you want to do something, because there's so many layers
Yeah,
to wanting to be creative. Like, we're all trying to hide from ourselves. So you might just suspect that you might want to maybe one day do something. But if you have that suspicion, it often, like, there's no way that you have that suspicion without the ability to do it. I'm not saying
okay,
you can necessarily walk onto a set straight away, but I am saying that there is something in your makeup that leans for that, and therefore it's in you to do it.
yeah,
So, because one man's trash is another man's treasure, is what it informs everything I do. Like, I will never, if somebody approached me and was like, I want to be creative, I would never impose what I think they should do on them. It's more about, well, what would you do? Like, Brianna Weiss, she's a fantastic woman. She's got so many books. I recommend everybody in the world should read her work. She talks about how, you everything that you desire comes from inside, where you also have the potential to do that thing. So potential and desire are like in you.
yeah,
So if you have the desire, you do have the potential. You might need to figure out the growth goal to get there. So it might be going to classes, it might be studying film, even it
yeah,
might be different ways for different people. But if you suspect that you have it in you, you likely do, which
yeah,
is terrifying to people. That
yeah,
is absolutely petrifying, because they kind of want to be told, you nearly want to be told and let off the hook that, like,
yeah,
oh, that would be silly,
yeah,
because then you're like, oh, thank God, because that sounds like really brave, vulnerable stuff
yeah,
to be doing. And I also feel like, just going back to the point of our chat, and I know I very early on I was like, oh, well, I'm this and you're that, and
mhm,
I don't think, no more than you and you talking about your history, I don't think you ever need to lead with it. I don't think
yeah,
and I do think that might be damaging if you brandished labels around, as in, this is me, and because it's never who you are. But I do feel like if you're honest, and all of a sudden when you're in a conversation and somebody reveals that they're equally flawed,
yeah, yeah,
all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, now we can chat,
yeah,
because the everybody is walking around thinking that we all have our shit together. And if there's a crack and you go, oh, that person might not necessarily have their shit together, that's okay. And then you bond, and then you
yeah,
can share things. Yeah. So I just, oh, by the way, yes, I just loved our chat the other day as well. So thank you for being
yeah.
honest.
No, it was brilliant, and we both figured out we'd been about 14 years sober as well. So it was like, which is obviously great. We are great. Um, I wanted to talk to you about this because I'm an extrovert.
Are you?
Yes, I am. Yeah, do you not think so? No,
That surprises me. That's
does it?
amazing. Good
Yeah,
for you. Yeah.
but I did. You chatted about that, and you mentioned about actors being extroverts. So when you are extroverting, if that is that the way you'd say it? Probably not.
It is
What
now.
do you, it is now? What do you like to do in your spare time?
If I'm choosing my spare time, I'm not extroverting. I'm
But
introverting.
was it who was it? No, last week, right? It was funny. Just this was last week. I asked someone what they like to do in their spare time, and they said, "What do you like to do in your spare time?" And I was like, and I knew everything because I've talked on the podcast enough about it. Like, and then they found it was almost like they needed to hear some stuff before they got the ideas. Do you know
Oh,
about what they do? And I think that's I think it's an interesting way of looking at it. But when I think of my spare time, I think of extroverting. I think of like going
really?
and
Wow.
reading and watching films and
For me, that's introverting, though.
it sorry, have I sorry,
Extroverting is where you're
you're
out
right.
there and
You're right.
you're like going to a party. And I
I'll cut
really,
that. No, I won't. I'll never edit things. When I make mistakes, I will not edit them. You're right.
the,
I'm
the
introverting.
confused
Yeah,
introvert
I'm.
with
I'm
Derek
the. I'm.
Wheatley.
I don't know what I have anymore, to be honest. So you said you were an introvert.
Oh,
Sorry,
yes,
that's my
100%.
bad.
Sorry.
Um, what do you like to do then when you are introverting?
I am stuck in a book. So I usually am reading around 5 books at the same time. Um, Books, podcasts. I always have something. I find films, I will seek films out, but films for me they make my brain work
Mm,
because I'm watching them and I'm analyzing them nearly.
yeah.
It takes a great film for me to really forget that I'm watching a film.
Yeah.
And yeah, I suppose it's the same. Maybe architects have the same thing when they look at buildings. Like I
Yeah.
don't know, but so for me, books. I even as a small person, I used to get in trouble for reading in the dark, and I think it's why I ended up with glasses for a while there.
Really?
Yeah, like I just I I I can't describe what books do for me. They just
Mm,
it's the escapism that I found in alcohol for a while.
yeah.
But it's a safer one.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, it's something that you can go to and visit and like live so many different lives on the pages of a book. Like it's just wow. Books for me. Yeah. So books, definitely. Films, podcasts. I love podcasts. I think
Yeah.
podcasts as well. You feel like you know the person because it's so
Yeah.
intimate. So you feel like you're probably going to have a hell of a lot more chats coming your way.
Yeah, it's highly likely. I think, and I've never thought of it in that way. That's the thing, because when I've listened to other podcasts, and like, especially if you're out and you've got your earphones in and the voice is there, and it's very intimate and stuff. I understand why, if people really like the podcast, really like the guests that you have on and stuff, and if they see it, why they would approach you and say hello, because they feel, well, I know your life story. Basically, it's all out there in these 195 episodes, so it's that kind of thing. I get it, but yeah, I when I'm listening to podcasts, it tends to be kind of music and films and kind of the arts, I suppose, like, is the best way of putting it. Sometimes I listen to the odd true crime stuff as well. Yeah, I enjoy that. And yeah, enjoy is a bad way to put it, but I remember having someone on talking about true crime as a podcaster, someone who podcasts for true crime, and it's I'd imagine it's a very difficult thing to do, because you have to approach it in a certain way. Like, there has to be
Of course.
humanity towards the victims, but then you have to almost like stunt your anger at the perpetrators and stuff. So it sounded like a lot of hard work. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I do
I,
love.
I I play music though. I love music.
Yeah.
I when I got injured, I'm just off the back of a physical injury which lasted a very long time. So during that time I learned the bodhrán and I love the bodhrán now. It's
Oh
my new
no,
favorite instrument.
I can't tell you what I say about the Baron on this podcast. You'll have
Do
to
you
go
not
back
like
and.
it? Oh, now if it's played well.
No, I tell you what,
I've
it was a
heard it
quote.
butchered before.
Yes, yeah, it has been
And it
butchered.
can be.
There was a quote. There was a quote from a musician where he said they all Baron should be played with a knife. It wasn't my quote, so I was really just re-quoting. I did say it to a Baron player, so it was in
When it's played
jest.
well. When it's played
Yeah,
well.
I mean,
Yeah.
everything can sound absolutely horrendous if it's played poorly. Like, any musician, instrument can sound horrendous when it's played poorly. So, like, why did you start the Baron then when you were injured? What was why the Baron?
Why did I start the bodhrán? That's a very good question. I found myself physically injured, so I could no longer run or walk.
Mhm.
Actually, it was quite a serious injury, and everything was basically stripped away. And so I had to find newer ways to be creative because what I did as a trade, which was, walk onto sets
Yeah,
and be a physical body, was no longer a possibility. So it was taken off the stage, for lack of a better phrase. So I found myself reaching, or I guess I just found myself playing more, as in
yeah,
that what do you pick up when you're bored and you can't do the thing that you do. You can't go for runs, you can't go for walks, you can't do much, and somehow it ended up being the bear run. I also I started learning more sign, and I started, I wrote a story with my mum, a children's book. So
that's right.
I did lots of things, but the bear run was one of them. I find it quite cathartic as well, just because
Just to hammer it
I'm
out.
very, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
quite a somatic person, like, and that's
yeah.
why I love running, because it's so rhythmic, and it just purges things. So I found drumming to be because I was seated. It did scratch that itch.
Yeah, I bought an electronic drum kit about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and I hadn't had a kit for a very long time. But it is absolutely cathartic to just sit there and just like smash away in it, even if like I
And
think I'm all right.
it goes back to the histories of
Yeah,
drumming, and like there's a reason that ancient civilizations did this thing. Like it gets into you on a
yeah,
primal level, drumming. I love it.
it does. And the I remember that there's a funny thing about you, Leah, because you kept popping up. I remember you came up the book you wrote with your mom, the children's
Oh
book.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I was like, right, I have to ask Leah again because I'd approached you a couple of times. I'm not calling you out here, by the way. It's just there's a timeline. There's a timeline to this. We got here in the end, but when you feel like obviously I wanted to talk to you in the first place, a while ago, and you were busy, and then you kept kind of popping up every so often, and I was like, often, and then our friend Kieran McNally who'll hopefully be back on soon. Um, gave a recommendation. And I think if someone gives you a recommendation, I think that's a really nice thing. That if someone says, "Oh, I have a really good guest for you," and says, gives me a name, that's a very nice thing for someone to do, I think.
Yeah, and it's why my first question, or one of them, was, who recommended me? Because I wanted to, I kind of, not because I wanted to know who it was from a kind of vanity metrics perspective, but more because none of us really know what we have to offer, so knowing who recommended you for whatever it is probably gives you a good indication of what is of merit for you to
Yeah,
share. And because we could all share so many different things, and it's I could talk about something completely irrelevant, and then what sort of a conversation is that? Whereas when you know what's of merit and what's of value, there's so much noise in the world these days. So
yeah,
I feel like if you're talking about something of value to somebody else, then that makes for an even broader experience for a podcast,
yeah,
because it helps the people on the podcast, but also just from a listenership perspective, as long as you're bringing value to a conversation and inviting other people to bring value, I just think, yeah. So
yeah.
shout out to Kieran McNally if he's
Shout
listening.
out to McNally, as you call him. I call him Kieran. I'm not quite there. We're a friendship just yet. But where can people find you, Leah, like Spinster Productions and stuff, if they do want to give you a shout?
So we're on social media, Spencer.production on Instagram, Facebook too, and LinkedIn if you're feeling very corporate. But usually you can find me on any of the platforms.
Yeah,
Leah underscore Egan underscore. It rolls off the tongue, doesn't
it
it?
does. Well, look,
It's on all of them. Instagram. I'm dabbling in TikTok, and by God,
oh, yeah,
it's an intense world out there.
I haven't been on it. I can't do it.
I wonder, I wonder as well whether this is also another conspiracy theory of mine. I think younger people, I can't believe I'm talking about younger people. I think younger people, because of the way that they grew up, and I see it in my niece and nephew, they
Mm,
have faster processing
yeah,
abilities. They do. And even I have a younger sister and a brother who are much, much younger, because I'm the eldest of five. So the two on the arse end of it, they'll love to hear. They, like, when I see them scrolling, they are so much quicker. Like
yeah,
they are just and I did wonder, are they even taking it in? But TikTok for me is just fast. It's
yeah.
just intense. There's so much in it, and if you are naturally anxious, I
Mm,
can see why people stay away, because it feels very loud. It
yes.
feels it's saturated with everything and anything. So yes, I'm dabbling in TikTok, but I'm on all the other ones. I love a good bit of Instagram as well.
Yeah, like I don't mind Instagram. TikTok wouldn't be. I don't think it'd be for me. I think I was, on a long train journey yesterday, and I arrived in Dublin, and we were like it was hammering down. And when you come out the Houston station, there's like the Lewis there, and it's got the two shelters, and we were all trying to huddle in at the shelter, and I was getting hit by bags, and everybody's on the phones and all that. And I thought, my God, I can't be handling this. I was at my wits end. I was at my wits end because it was such a long journey, and the train was packed. And at one point, I was standing up, like, because the train was packed. And the woman with the cart, and look, I know it's the rules, fair enough. But I said, could I get tea? And she was, you have to be sitting down to drink it. And I was like, anyway, this is me just going off on a
I
rant.
just love, for those moments though, when you just love, like, because everyone takes it. No, I'm not saying you. I
Yeah,
just mean in those situations that are incredibly tense, because everybody's so cranky, and they are so
yeah,
cranky because they're all anxious, and nobody gives a f, and they don't want to be there, and they're tired, and they just wanted a tea, and she was a wagon, and she didn't give
yeah,
me a tea. And I just wish in those moments someone had burst into song or something. Do you
yeah,
know what I mean? Like,
yeah, yeah,
just so we could all stop And it's not to say that you're taking yourself too seriously. We all do it.
Yeah.
We all get pent up in how like just the menial existence of like walking from A to B and the rain and the shittery. I just want to like hop up and be like, stop me, like just do something
Jim
insane where everyone's
Carrey
just,
again.
yeah, where everyone's just shaken out of our like anxiousness nearly, where you're
Would you
like, oh
do it,
yeah,
Leah? Would you do
none
it?
of this matters. Would I do what?
Would you jump up and do that?
No, sir.
See what I mean? I love the idea of someone just singing it like, I don't know why this opening lines of The Heart of Glass by Blondie came into my head there. That'd be a great song to actually stand up and sing. But
It. I
yeah,
would do it if I was in a playful mood. I would definitely
would
do
you?
it,
Oh
but
God.
I'd have to be leaving pretty soon
Yeah,
after.
as you're backing
Like
away. Yeah, I like the idea of as you're crawling out the train window, you're singing a song.
yeah,
But I look the idea of the silliness of I love musicals, by the way, but the
do you?
silliness, yeah, I do. I think they're great. But I think that when people don't like them because someone stands up and starts singing, but like, why not?
The door is closing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
like,
remember. I remember seeing a musical and just sitting there and going, "Oh my God, he's going to pick up a pencil and they're going to sing about it." And I
yeah,
just remember being like, "Oh my God!" But
uh,
but great musicals, no more than
yeah,
great theater. If you don't like musicals, it's because you haven't seen a really excellent musical. And if you
yeah.
don't like theater, it's because you haven't seen somebody really do theater. Like I defy anyone to see Andrew Scott on a stage and tell me that they don't like theater. He would blow you away. It
Really.
doesn't really matter what he's doing. Yeah, he's one of my favorite actors. But same for musicals. If you don't like musicals, it's often that you haven't A, given them a chance, or B, actually seen one, because a
Yeah.
great musical, genie, it'll rock your socks off.
Oh, the first time I saw, and this was probably the turning point. The first time I saw West Side Story, and I thought, Jesus, I think I was wrong about this stuff. It was like, incredible. Like I've seen some bad
Mm,
ones as well, but for the most part, the ones that they call classics are called classics for a reason, and they're
absolutely.
definitely worth your time. But we've gone seriously off track here, Leah. But it's all right. It's all about
I
going off track.
did warn you. I did
Yeah,
warn you that creativity and all of the things is
yeah.
my favorite thing to talk about. So I will go for days.
That's well, I would happily do it too, but listeners, I have to placate the listeners as well at times. But Leah, you have been a fantastic guest, and I'm glad we finally got to chat on this.
Thank you for having me and
You're
for having
more than
such an
welcome,
honest, meaningful conversation.
and
I really
right back
appreciate it.
at you. Stick with me for 1 minute. I'll close this out. We'll get a little photo for the archives, and then we'll be on our way. All right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Leah. Also have to thank John Francis for doing the tech stuff. Sorry about last week, Mr. Francis. But sometimes you got to earn your money. He'll know what I mean. That doesn't really matter. I want to thank my mom, my dad, my granddad. I always thank them. I thank Jaron Calvin for the music and the logo. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you would. Facebook, Twitter, and X, whatever that is. We're also on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts, etc. I never look at the camera, actually. I don't even know it was there while I was looking at the camera. I very rarely do it. But thank you very much for everyone for watching and for listening. And once again, Leah, thank you so much. All
Thank
right,
you.
everyone. We'll see you next week. Take care. Bye.